So I might start if that's okay.
Yes, yes. Okay, absolutely.
Thanks, Karen. I might just explain who MSA is and what MSA does. So MSA is a not-for-profit owned by industry, peak industry organisations, employer organisations and unions own MSA. And we have a scholarship fund that was left from when we were Industry Skills Council. Industry Skills Council is responsible for the development of the standards for trade occupations around manufacturing. And we had looked into where we could best have an impact with scholarship fund monies that were available to us. We identified that there was a significant need in the vet sector as there's been a transition in the vet workforce where people have retired in recent times. And there's also been a labour shortage, particularly in the manufacturing sector, and people are being drawn back on financial terms as well as conditions and so on. And the vet sector are struggling to attract and retain teachers. So we had approached you, Karen, to endeavour to explore the way that we could encourage people who are our traditional tradespeople to take up a career in vet, or at least have an interest in it, so that we could build the future workforce. And that's resulted in a report that we now have on our website. So, Karen, can you give us a little bit of a outline of your background in your own words, and maybe an introduction to the research?
Yes, hi. Thanks very much, Leon. Thanks for inviting me to take part in this podcast. So, as you've already mentioned, I'm a researcher, but I actually started out my career as an apprentice or a metal fabricator and welder. So I did my apprenticeship and I worked in industry for almost 20 years before I decided to move into TAFE teaching to teach my trade, because I absolutely love my trade and I was a pressure vessel welder, so I like to teach the welding side of things, especially. And eventually, that teaching led me to do a teaching degree at university, which, of course, one thing led to another. And before I knew it, I was doing overseas fellowships and getting into research, and I got a scholarship to do a PhD, of which I did. I focused my doctoral studies on researching engineering trade education in Victoria, which, of course, my trade and metal engineering and manufacturing, of course, are great loves of mine. And even though I've transitioned from the trade into research, still the trade and vocational education are still my main focus in research and the areas I really appreciate, or I really, really love to investigate, read about, and write about. So my roots are very much in the manufacturing and engineering background. And of course, I think this eventually led to Richard calling me up and asking, would I be interested in pursuing this research that MSA was interested in getting done. That is, as you mentioned, trying to investigate ways of encouraging manufacturing workers to move into the vocational education teaching area. So, of course, that was an opportunity I jumped at, and it was a fabulous project. So it actually concluded at the end of last year. It was sort of in the final months of last year that the last year being 2023, that the project was conducted. So it finished a little while ago. But thanks. So I think MSA, or Richard at least, and I've met quite a number of people on the MSA board, and I think these people were aware of my background and my trade background, and obviously think my name got thrown around a bit, and eventually I was asked to do the study, which I absolutely love. Thank you.
So we've got a little bit of a scratch in the background, so if you can just be aware of the noise in the background, that'd be appreciated. Can you outline for us the methodology that was used and explain,
Mm,
uh, you know, about the size of the study and
mm,
what your conclusions were, and uh,
okay.
what this means for us on the basis of the research that you did.
Yeah, okay. So there's quite a lot of information to cover here, Leon, with that question. So the first thing I did was look at. I'd originally had a talk to Richard. Now, originally the project was how can we encourage more tradespeople to move into teaching in vocational education. However, that quickly expanded. So it wasn't just tradespeople. We ended up looking at it, ended up being sort of any manufacturing worker was going to be invited to take part in the study. So what I did is I had to think about how we would go about it because it was an Australian-wide study. And the first thing the researcher has to do is try and come up with the research question. And then the study is designed around the question, if you like. So the key question that I came up with was how can skilled manufacturing workers be encouraged to teach their vocation in the Australian vet sector? And under that were a couple of sub-questions. And so I'll read those out because these helped sort of shape the research. The first sub-question was, what are the barriers that restrict or prevent manufacturing workers from entering vocational teaching? The second sub-question was, what are the enablers, the things that encourage manufacturing workers to enter the vocational teaching profession? And there was also a bit of a side project that Richard wanted me to include, and which was this question was, what initiatives have already been trialled to recruit industry professionals to become vet trainers? So that involved also, aside from the main study, looking at a few other projects that have been happening in Australia, just to see what some other TAFEs or organisations were doing to try and encourage people to become vet teachers. So there was quite a lot of work involved. Now the study I won't go into details, but people that are familiar with research might understand what I'm about to say. The study was conducted using pragmatic mixed methods methodology, which included an online survey and some short semi-structured interviews, which were conducted as there was just 11 of them conducted as follow-up interviews, just to try and get some richer data from people that completed the questionnaire. So the main study, the main methodology, I suppose, consisted of an online survey, and I thought that just having the link that could be, in this day when everyone's got a phone and internet technology and a computer, I thought if we just have a link that's easily accessible, it can be forwarded on, I thought that would possibly get the best reach. So we ended up, so anyway, for data collection, when I was creating the survey, I tried to focus on questions around the factors that acted as the enablers and those that acted as barriers, the things that were preventing manufacturing workers from entering vet teaching, because this would give some really rich data and answer the question. So not just collecting the things that stop them from entering the vet teaching, but I also wanted to find out what are those things that get the people over the line, what makes them want to become the enablers, what makes them want to step into vet teaching from being a professional, whether it be tradesperson, technician, or whatever other profession in the manufacturing area. Anyway, because knowing what the enablers are can, in theory, can help attract people to transition careers into the vet teaching profession. One of the questions you asked me earlier, I don't know if you asked it then, but I'll answer it now. So it says, why did I think this is an important issue? It's widely held that there are quite serious teacher shortages in the vet not just in Australia, but overseas as well. There was a recent OECD report that reported that there's vet teaching shortages, not just in Australia, but throughout most OECD countries. So, finding ways to encourage mid-career professionals, people that are working in manufacturing, to transition into the vet teaching workforce it's a big issue, not just here in Australia, but for most countries around the world. So anyway, has that answered the question?
Yeah. So resulting from your research, what were the
Yeah.
key findings and how would you rank those findings?
Okay, the key findings for the study. Okay, so there is the key findings were, if you don't mind, I'll just find
Yeah,
where I'm
on
up to
page
in my
10 of
notes.
the,
Yeah.
and for the listeners and viewers of the podcast, I'm going to include links to the research papers so you can go and have a look at the research
Oh, yeah.
and the key findings.
Yeah. Actually, there was some more about the methodology I haven't covered. But, okay, so the key findings, okay. So I divided the key findings up into the barriers and the enablers, the things that the data told us were preventing people from moving into the vet teaching workforce, and the things, then the enablers, the things that were encouraging them. What I found for the barriers, it seemed to be, at least from survey data, the thing that came through most strongly was the cost of the training qualification. The certificate for TAE came out as number one. That's the thing most people said was the number one barrier, if you like. The second one was lack of time to study. People were saying, "Well, I'm so busy at work. I wouldn't have time to study. Even if I could afford the qualification, who's got time to study the thing?" Then there was the risks involved, and this came through. It was number three in the survey. However, this came through more strongly, I think, with the interview data. Like when you actually get to interview people, different things raised to the surface. And it seemed to be one of the biggest barriers. Seemed to be the risks that people perceive of leaving one career and moving into another. Now, especially because in the TAFE sector, there's not many full-time jobs or secure jobs in the TAFE sector, and so a lot of people were saying, "Well, why would I risk having to complete an expensive training qualification for a job that may or may not exist at the other end? And then two, why would I leave my secure, well-paid job to enter into the vet teaching workforce, which is well known for having, insecure jobs, or maybe temporary jobs, or short-term contracts? There's not a lot of full-time ongoing teaching jobs in the TAFE sector, at least. And so I was hearing this quite a bit. So, it seemed quite reasonable. Yeah, so the next one, of course, was job insecurity and low levels of remuneration. Now, that's not necessarily true because, at least in Victoria, the TAFE teachers are paid quite well, and we have opportunity, especially if they're more highly qualified, they have opportunity to have, six-figure salaries, which are, good conditions and all the rest of it. So, but that was a perception that there's low-level pay in the vet teaching workforce. The TAE qualification, the training qualification itself, is a barrier in the minds of a lot of people. For example, some people, not only is it potentially expensive to study, a few people said to me that they started studying, but it was all it was quite onerous, and it didn't fit in with their they were still trying to work and do the thing, and they might be trying to study the thing online, and they felt they weren't getting enough help from the teachers on the other end, and they ended up dropping out. So a lot of people see the TAE itself, and this came from the voices came from people who were very passionate about their trades. Like I just remember off the top of my head one case of a chef that did it, and he completed the survey And he's obviously very passionate about his trade, and he loves teaching apprentices on the job, and he felt that he could really contribute a lot to the curriculum in vet. And so he was really passionate about becoming a teacher. But as it turned out, it was he enrolled in the TAE and paid a lot of money to do it, but he just said he just couldn't do it. It was just too onerous and too difficult, and he didn't get enough help, and he ended up dropping out and therefore wasting time and money doing it. And so he was actually really disappointed. So he and a couple of other people I spoke to actually found the TAE itself as a barrier, and that's no significant thing. A few people also talked about, not many, but there was a few cases of hostilities talked about in the TAFE sector, where
when you talk about TAFE, we're talking about RTOs generally, right? So TAFE is, I guess, an overarching sort of
yes.
Although for a
both
training organisation.
Both of these people were from TAFE. So, but you're right. But it's it is known, and I know through other research as well, that there are exist some hostile workplaces in some RTOs, and of course, again, who wants to leave a job that you're potentially happy at to go and work somewhere where you're not appreciated or treated with hostility? Some people had concerns about the efficacy of vet, just, is it fit for purpose? Is the vet sector fit for purpose? Some people were concerned about attitudes of learners saying, well, why would I want to go and teach a bunch of kids who'll just give me lip and, they haven't got the right attitude. And a few people mentioned meta concerns about the future of manufacturing just in general, just as an overarching thing, pointing to the demise of the car industry in Australia and saying, well, the government didn't even want to support the industry, so they sort of felt manufacturing was not being supported in the country at the time. I mean, of course, since then we've had that announcement where the government have announced a commitment to manufacturing, especially manufacturing renewables and green energy futures and everything. So that sounds a bit optimistic anyway.
I guess the research that you've done has sort of presented us with some opportunities, identifying key barriers and so on. The board, in its review of the research that you did, have decided that they want to pursue a little bit more around this, and we went on to get you to provide us with a scoping report about any of the barriers that you might have seen from a research point of view to getting proper data and so on. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yes, I can. Now, so during the study, it became apparent that there was some gaps in the data because, of course, you do literature review and we identify, and of course, when you're doing the literature review, you're trying to, scope the literature and see what information there is. And of course, in doing so, you also find out what isn't. And you think, gee, that would have been helpful if that piece of information existed. But what we do instead, even if it doesn't exist or we can't find it, we make a list of what we say are gaps or potential areas for research opportunities. Absolutely. Now, I'm just trying to find my notes, if you just give me half a second, because there was a couple of areas we found. Now, so in the research gaps, the first one that we found was the supply and demand of vet teachers and trainers in Australia. So that's a big one because it's actually unknown. I can't find any data anywhere, and I think it's subsequently been confirmed. There's no one sort of keeping tabs, or there's no track of numbers. There's no nobody's quantifying how many vet teachers there are in Australia or in the States. Whether it be from TAFE trainers or other RTOs or schools, it's just data not being collected. And so how do we know? It's widely assumed that there are widespread vet teacher shortages. However, this statement can't be confirmed until there is actually data that people can point to and go, right, there is clearly a shortage, which is problematic, from a perspective, this perspective, because it's hard to even argue that there is vet teacher shortages or something needs to be done until data is collected on the issue.
Yeah, data is
Uh,
always a big issue, isn't it? Like,
mm,
I guess the peak organisation for the vet sector is NCVR.
mm,
I know from our board, we are looking at approaching NCVR with this scoping report, identifying what these gaps are, and suggesting that further research needs to be done, or at least the data be collected. That might also lead to Jobs and Skills Australia looking into it a little bit as well. We are focusing again from our scholarship fund to fund further research, or at least partner with organisations who might be interested in pursuing these gaps, so we can get a better picture of what the vet workforce looks like in its transition into and out of the vet sector. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us here to at least spell out for people, and I guess demystify or remove the myths that you've experienced through your research. I think that's one of the key objectives of what MSA will pursue.
mm,
And then we'll also look at where we might be able to do further research to encourage people to take up these opportunities, as well
mm,
as trying to address some of the perceived barriers. I know in the research I've done recently, I think most states now are funding the TAE. I think some people aren't aware of that, or they've gone searching
mm,
for it and not known where to find it. So
mm,
that's an opportunity for us as
mm,
an organisation that's focused on the vet on manufacturing workforce, to provide that information, and we're very interested in looking at what comes next. So, is there anything you'd like to add about the research that you've done and all the opportunities that are coming?
okay, well, I'm certainly hoping that NCV are receptive to uh, the paper that MSA put in, because there was actually more than that, because I just also wanted to add that there's also perceived, it's believed that a lot of TAFE teachers have been leaving the vet teaching profession, and so that is also an area that needs researching. That was actually identified by the AU, but again, that would be really beneficial, to know why people are leaving the sector. So it's
Yeah,
one thing we sort of looked at for this particular study. We looked at what's stopping workers from entering the sector, but there on the other side of the coin, we've got a lot of our teachers leaving the sector. So
yeah,
that again would be a very important piece of study that
yeah.
needs
I
to
think
be done.
anecdotally
You know.
we got a feeling for why it happens, but the
Yeah,
data is important, right?
that's
That
right.
we put
Absolutely.
the evidence on the table, and we can start to address those issues.
Yes, absolutely. I just want to say it was a wonderful opportunity being able to work for MSA, and of course, this is a topic that's very close to my heart. Although it was a relatively small study, I think we got 126 participants that were eligible to do the study, and we did 11 interviews from those. Even though it was probably a relatively small scale study, we did reach saturation, which means when you start to hear the same people saying the same things over and over as a researcher, when you start hearing the same sort of responses to the questions over and over, that's telling the researcher, we've reached saturation. We've got the main sort of data that's coming through. So I am quite confident that it was the study has captured some really important information, not just for MSA, but of course anyone who wishes to read it. I believe the report is available on the MSA website to be
Yeah,
downloaded.
and as I said, I'll include the links to this recording so that people can go and check that out. If they want to provide any feedback, obviously you can contact me as the executive officer of MSA through our website. and we'd be really interested in continuing the conversation around this
Mm,
really important subject matter, because I think without having teachers available to train the future workforce for manufacturing,
mm,
regardless of government policies around supporting the manufacturing sector, this is the engine room that drives the workforce. So, really, really important issues. So, Karen, thanks
mm.
very much for your time today. Really appreciate your expertise and your capability in communicating the issues that were found in your research. And I look forward to working with you again in the future.
Wonderful. And you too. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Leon. And I'd like to thank MSA as well for the opportunity to engage in this really important research.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Cheers.